always told me that I was right out of my head. He said I need treatment, but I'm not that easily led. He said I was the type that was most inclined, when out of his sight, to be out of my mind. And he thought I was nuts. No more ifs or ands or buts. They say as a child I appeared a little bit wild with all my crazy ideas, but I knew what was happening. I knew I was a genius.
Hi, I'm Joy Cunningham, and today is day 122 of my gratitude project.
That I was right out of my head. He said I need treatment, but I'm not that easily led. He said I was the type that was most inclined, when out of his sight, to be out of my mind. And he thought I was nuts. No more ifs or ands or buts. They say as a child I appeared a little bit wild with all my crazy ideas, but I knew what was happening. I knew I was a genius.
Hi, I'm Joy Cunningham, and today is day 122 of my gratitude project.
That I was right out of my head. He said I need treatment, but I'm not that easily led.
It's been fun, so much fun. We're so rich. One of the best things I've ever done. I'd like to thank Cindy Williams for inspiring me, my friends on Facebook and family who've been so supportive of my posts, and Linda Nenno for suggesting we read some of them together tonight. The readings are a selection of this trip into gratitude that I've taken, so welcome to Life Among the Barbarians. Day one. Okay, here goes. I had planned to have day one of my gratitude project be the 20th anniversary of my father's death, which was January 27th, 2020. I thought this would be a great way to remember my father, and perhaps to call to myself his patience, his equilibrium, and curiosity. So I got up early on Monday, January the 27th, and clocked through the many things that I have to do to get my daughter out the door by 6:40 a.m. for her 7 a.m. training session at the gym. I was calm, I was competent. I had this gratitude thing off to a good start. And then I found the dog pee on the carpet. Dog pee needs to be dealt with immediately, but I needed to leave immediately. Nothing about my reaction to this was admirable or in the least reflective of my father's fine reserve and wry humor. I got my daughter to the Y. Upon return, I continued with the dog pee protocol, and then I took both dogs on a walk. After the walk, during which I was trying not to hate the dogs, I got dressed for an appointment and smelled something weird. Oh, there's dog shit on my shoe, and on the side of my other shoe, and on the shirt that the shoe touched, and somehow on an empty manila folder on the counter that apparently either the shoe or maybe the shirt had touched. Emmy pitched the manila folder into the trash, and I flung the rest into the backyard to hose down later, changed my clothes again, and took my daughter to school. This is all before 8:30 in the morning. At this moment, I'm not feeling grateful or disposed to muse about sweet times in the past for which I might feel grateful. Eventually, I know that this will be a good story, but starting a gratitude project with dog shit was not what I had in mind. On my other shoe, and on the shirt that the shoe. Day 7. In my time, I've been to a lot of marches where I've chanted, "This is what democracy looks like." But the most memorable experience I've had of democracy looked very different. It was at an all-day meeting of the Gila Mesa Association at our cabin in the Gila Wilderness. Members had traveled from all over the country to solve a problem. The problem was this: a new couple to the association discovered that the road on the mesa cut right through their property, and that part of the property was being used as a corral by another family, Bjornstadts. The Greens rightly thought they should have their property undivided and all to themselves. the Bjornstedts had built a life there and thought they should be allowed to continue to use that. Green says, the Platt says what the Platt says. Feelings were a bit raw. This was going to be a tough one. We met all day. Everyone got to have their say. The parliamentary protocol held us to our best behavior, and the bylaws of the association kept us true to protect the environment and making decisions by consensus. It was exhausting and exhilarating. At the end of the day, we voted unanimously to move the road and have all members contribute equally to pay for it. Then we all went to another member's cabin and had a lovely meal together. And that is what democracy looks like. Everyone got
today. The Senate acquitted Trump on both impeachment charges. Everyone knew it was coming. In a way.
Hi, y'all. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're having some technical difficulties. Linda, I need you to mute the YouTube video if you're currently watching at the same time as streaming so that we don't get a feedback loop. Or just close the YouTube tab. Sorry about this. Love you all. Hugs and kisses.
Are we good? Okay.
You good, Linda?
Yes.
All right, here we go. Sorry for the interruption.
Hello there.
Everyone got
today. The Senate acquitted Trump on both impeachment charges. Everyone knew it was coming. Melissa?
Hi. Hi, y'all. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're having some technical difficulties. Linda, I need you to mute the YouTube video if you're currently watching at the same time as streaming so that we don't get a feedback loop.
So where do I mute that though?
Or just close the YouTube tab.
I'm sorry. I don't know where
Love you all.
Where that is.
Are we good?
No. I don't know what you're talking.
We're recording and then hearing it again.
All right, here we go. Sorry for the interruption.
Hello there. Everyone.
Yep. Linda, do you have a YouTube tab open?
I don't. I only have the tab you opened. But I sent. I didn't open a YouTube app.
Okay. We're having some technical difficulties. Linda, I need you to mute the. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do, Linda, is log off and log back on.
All right.
Just click the same meeting.
So where do I mute that though?
Link.
Okay, I'm going to end my. I'm sorry. I don't know.
Yep, just log back on.
Where that is.
Are we good?
No. I don't know what you're talking.
Okay, we're currently in a holding pattern. Sorry, folks. And we're going to get Linda back on. Hopefully we won't have a feedback loop when she comes back on. Big round of applause for y'all watching and for Zoom. Yes, Ev says, look, this is just like a real Zoom meeting. It certainly is.
Okay.
And we're certainly glad to have you on tonight. And we're so excited to be sharing Joy's writing with you and the lovely collaboration between Joy and Linda.
Okay. All right. Should I maybe mute when I'm not talking or?
No, you're fine.
Okay. Hi, everybody. We're going to try again. Thanks for tuning in.
I don't know how I got. She said
Linda's back.
She wants me.
She's figuring it out, and she's got technical help on the ground.
Uh-huh.
You know, this is a Vortex show, so maybe this is the show. Life's gratitudes about Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
And by the way, folks, if you're hearing my voice, I'm Melissa Vogt. I'm the managing director at the Vortex. and I am running tonight's stream. So y'all are getting to see the real life technical difficulties of putting on virtual theater.
No. So Melissa, I think I figured it out.
Okay.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, you're back. Lovely.
Yes.
Oh, that is perfect.
Do you think we should start over?
Yes, I do.
I'm fine with starting over. So that's what we're going to do, folks. We're just going to start over, start fresh, and I'm going to get off the line so y'all could go. Break legs.
Thank you.
Hey. Hi, guys. I'm Joy Cunningham, and today is day 122 of my gratitude project, which has been so much fun. One of the best things I've ever done. So I'd like to thank Cindy Williams for inspiring me with her gratitude post, my friends on Facebook and my family who have been so supportive, and Linda Nenno for suggesting that we read some of them together tonight, which by golly, we're going to do. The readings are a selection of this trip into gratitude that I've taken. So welcome to Life Among the Barbarians. Zoom is part of it. Okay, day one. Okay, here goes. I had planned to have day one of my gratitude project be the 20th anniversary of my father's death, January 27th, 2020. I thought this would be a great way to remember my father and perhaps to call to myself his patience, his equilibrium, and his curiosity. I got up early on Monday, January the 27th, and I clocked through the many things that I have to happen to get my daughter out the door by 6:40 for her 7 a.m. training session at the gym. I was calm. I was competent. I had this gratitude thing off to a good start. And then I found the dog pee on the carpet. Dog pee needs to be dealt with immediately, but I needed to leave immediately. Nothing about my reaction to this was admirable or in the least reflective of my father's fine reserve and wry humor. I got my daughter to the Y. Upon return, I continued with the dog pee protocol and then took both dogs on a walk. After the walk, during which I was trying not to hate the dogs, I got dressed for an appointment and smelled something weird. Oh, there's dog shit all over my shoe and on the side of my other shoe and on the shirt that my shoe touched, and somehow on an empty manila folder on the counter that apparently the shoe or maybe the shirt touched, Emmy pitched the manila folder into the trash. I flung the rest into the backyard to hose down later, changed my clothes again, and took my daughter to school. This is all before 8:30 in the morning. At this moment, I'm not feeling grateful or disposed to muse about sweet times in the past for which I might feel grateful eventually. I know this will be a good story, but starting a gratitude project with dog shit was not what I had in mind. Day 7. In my time, I've been a lot of marches where I've chanted, "This is what democracy looks like." But the most memorable experience that I've had of democracy looked very different from that. It was at an all-day meeting of the Gila Mesa Association at our cabin in the Gila Wilderness. Members had come in from all over the country to solve a problem. The problem was this. A new couple to the association discovered that the road on the mesa cut right through their property and that their property was being used as a corral by another family, the Bjornstadts. The Greens rightly thought they should have their property undivided and all to themselves. The Bjornstadts had built a life there and thought they should be allowed to continue to use it as the corral. The Greens said, "The plat says what the plat says." Feelings were a bit raw. This was going to be tough. We met all day. Everyone got to have their say. The parliamentary protocol held us to our best behavior, and the bylaws of the association kept us true to protecting the environment and making decisions by consensus. It was exhausting and exhilarating. At the end of the day, we voted unanimously to move the road and have all members contribute equally to pay for it. Then we all went to another member's cabin and had a lovely meal together. And that is what democracy looks like.
Day 8. Today, the Senate acquitted Trump on both impeachment charges. Everyone knew it was coming, in the way you know someone is going to die, but that's not the same as when they actually die. I felt grief-stricken, and tonight I'm exhausted. Wondered what to be grateful for. Earlier this evening, I joined a few other citizens at City Hall to protest the acquittal. Not many folks honked, not like they used to at marches back in the good old Austin. We got a few from people in older cars and work trucks, but workers headed home in office attire, sipping their commute home coffees, cocooned in their BMWs and Lexuses, could not be bothered even to look in our direction. Oh, but it felt good to be there with people who care about the rule of law, the Constitution, and human decency. When I got home, I made my way upstairs to catch Rachel Maddow in hopes she would make sense of the day for me, as she often does. I was not disappointed. As it turns out, today, I'm grateful for Mitt Romney. The Mitt Romney whom I have ridiculed for going to Paris, France, not Texas, on his Mormon mission as a young man, the guy who drove to Canada with the dog on the top of his car. But today, Mitt Romney did the right thing, and he gave a great speech. Senator Chris Murphy said it would go down in history as one of the most important speeches of his time in the Senate. What Mitt Romney did, said Senator Murphy, was give him hope that all is not broken, all is not lost. Thank you, Mitt Romney, for being the one who stood between us and being broken and lost. I wish I could stop thinking about the weird Mormon underwear and the fact that your grandfather fled the States to practice polygamy in Mexico, and that your father ran for president and somehow it didn't matter that he was born in Mexico. But I'm thankful for the sliver of hope you brought today.
Day 19. It's late and I'm tired, which is not to say that I'm not grateful, because I am. And one of the things I'm grateful for is Rachel Maddow, for her absolute persistence with the Russia story, her eternal good humor, her vocabulary, her grasp of the whole. I am grateful that she has often held the spot as the #1 news anchor, and that as a woman, a super smart woman, a lesbian, and out lesbian, that she provides a lifeline of reason and clarity for so many people in these times. Growing up, I don't remember a single female authority, although I did love Lucy, and my kids just take it for granted that Rachel is a star. Somebody who was influential enough to talk her network into giving to her a full 20-minute opening monologue without a single commercial. And what a beautiful thing that is, to have 20 uninterrupted minutes of intelligence. And I am grateful for the lady on I-35 who finally let us change lanes yesterday on our way to San Antonio. Day 34. Back on election night of 2016, Gretchen was in Ohio knocking doors for Hillary, and the three of us were watching the returns at home. As everyone remembers from that night, the unbelievable began to unspool before our eyes. The thing that we had promised our children could not possibly happen was happening. And so I put my kids to bed to spare them watching the world turn upside down live on TV. A pervert isn't supposed to be a president. A guy who mocks disabled people isn't supposed to be president. A guy who says if only his daughter were his daughter, he'd be dating her, isn't supposed to be president. We had just had a man in that office who sang Amazing Grace after the massacre at the Emmanuel AME Church. A man who never missed dinner with his family, who stayed up late and got up early to best serve and protect his country. So I went in alone in front of the television that night, calling friends all over the country, like you do, when there's been a sudden death or an event like 9/11, trying to make sense of what could never make sense. It was cold comfort, and I, like so many, went to bed just sick. I knew I had to break the news to both girls in the morning. They had been following the election pretty closely and were hoping for the first woman president. Emmy was up first, and I told her what had happened. She stood still for a moment, letting that sink in, and then said simply, "Well, we'll just have to elect another one next time." She was so earnest and clear, I felt my heart crack. "Yes, Emmy, that's what we'll have to do. Thanks for the way forward, sweetheart."
Day 35. Today, Elizabeth Warren dropped out of the race, and I'm not feeling a lot of gratitude. We've been so beaten up by these last 3 years that it seems like we've lost our bearings altogether, like an abused wife. We can't see the way out. That's all we want. We want out. But on some level, we don't think it's possible. We want someone to save us from all this, but who is that someone? Andrew Yang used to joke that the opposite of the current president is an Asian guy who is good at math. Yeah, that's a good line. But how is a super smart, disciplined woman not the opposite of the thing that is in the White House that never reads? How is a woman who went to work as a waitress at the age of 13 not the opposite of a guy whose dad gave him $1 million that he never had to pay back? How can a woman who embodies the best of us not be the opposite of a man who embodies the worst? Oh, Elizabeth Warren had it all. The story of growing up in dusty Oklahoma and her father losing his job and the family coming close to losing the house. The story of her working her way from being a lowly teacher to teaching at Harvard. Her understanding of the economy and her plans to fix it. Her sense of humor, her selfies, her motto, dream big, fight hard. The way she took the legs out of from under Bloomberg in the Nevada debate. Oh, and Biden better write her a big thank you note for that. It seems that the opposite of the old white guy we have is going to be another old white guy. I think we all know why that is. What Warren said in her announcement about sexism when asked is that it's a trap for women. You say it's plays a part in your defeat, and you're accused of whining. You say it has no effect, and every female person asks you what planet you're living on. When asked what was the hardest moment today in her announcement that she was suspending her campaign, Warren said it was thinking of her staff and her volunteers who had sacrificed so much for her campaign. And of all those little girls who'd have to wait another 4 years for a woman to run for president, she characteristically thought of others first. I am so grateful for this woman's integrity, her grit, her grace, her decency, her compassion, and the model she has provided for future women leaders. I'm going to close, however, with a quote from Kate Mann, a philosopher from Cornell University. Misogyny is the enforcement arm of the patriarchy. We knew Warren was the best candidate, but our internalized misogyny wouldn't let us vote for her. And we unwittingly served as the enforcement arm of the patriarchy. We have got to quit doing that.
Day 38. Daddy used to say, there's nothing wrong with just sitting and looking. And I know that makes him sound off the country, but he was anything but. He had a little twinkle in his eye when he said that. So he was, as we would say now, putting it in quotes. He actually spoke quite beautifully in phrases that would sound almost 19th century now. He referred to his family as kin or kinfolk. He called the trunk of a car the boot, the freezer the icebox, and the glove compartment the glove box. When he needed to think about something, he would say he would cogitate on it. If you had done something extraordinary, he would say, "Well, aren't you knocking down the high persimmons?" For those of you unfamiliar with the persimmon tree, persimmons grow to a considerable height, and the first to ripen are at the top of the tree. Of course, those are the sweet ones that you want to eat, so you have to figure out how to knock them down, which, as you can imagine, involves some ingenuity and effort. Daddy's favorite Bible verse, or one of them, was John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He loved the mystery of those words and the poetry of the King James Bible. I feel like some of the cadence of it was almost foundational in the way he formed sentences. He respected words and what they could do. It resonated deeply with him that the Word and God were one. When he was in the nursing home and the Parkinson's had caused him to lose his remarkable faculties, my brother Walker went to visit him. Daddy didn't seem to recognize him, and after chatting as best he could for a bit, Walker noticed a Bible on the table. He turned to Psalm 23 and asked if Daddy would like him to read it. He said yes, he would. When Walker was finished reading, Daddy seemed to come out of his haze. His face brightened, and he looked at Walker with sudden recognition and said, "You must be my son, Walker." And that is the power of the Word. Day 39. I'm here to tell you that it always hasn't been like this American carnage. I remember when the middle class was alive and well. In Blackstone, Virginia, the small town where I grew up, if they were rich people, they were quiet about it. We had poor people, of course, but it was the middle class that defined the place. Blackstone and small towns and small farms around it across America were exhibit A of how the free market should work. Our main street was hopping. We had 2 of every kind of retail, all locally owned, and a stockyard and a lumber yard and a Coca-Cola bottling plant, a Craddock Terry shoe factory and a Levi Strauss plant, and our local velvet textile mills proudly cranked out the velvet that lined coffins. We had a local health clinic, which in its heyday had up to 12 doctors. Every eatery was locally owned. There was not a single fast food chain, not one. You could buy pretty much whatever you needed right there in town. If there was a problem with it, you returned it. The repair department, if they couldn't fix it, they sent it to the manufacturer, and either they fixed it or you got a new one. Buy local wasn't a bumper sticker. It was what we did. And I'm not saying this world was perfect by any means. In those days, a woman could have her own credit card. I didn't know a single woman in a profession other than teaching. Prince Edward County shut down the public schools rather than integrate and gave birth to the phenomenon of private schools popping up for the sole purpose of avoiding mixing the races. All that. Yes, but I am grateful that I grew up in a small town in an America not racked by drugs, anger, and deaths of despair, and that I can tell you about it. So you can know that it once existed and that we can recreate it or some version of it, but this time expanded to include everybody.
Day 42. It is day 2 of the president's declared national emergency and day 1144 of the ongoing national emergency that is this president. The last time there was a national emergency of this size was World War II, when all citizens were asked to participate in the war effort somehow. Victory gardens, turn out your lights, save your aluminum foil. I wish I could feel more united with my fellow citizens in this crisis, pulling towards a common goal. I'd like to feel like I'm doing something useful for my country. After 9/11, when Americans wanted to know how to help, all George W. Bush told us to do was to go shopping. For the pandemic, all we've been told is to stay home and wash our hands. But that doesn't feel like we're doing something. We want to do something. In the theater, we say, dying is easy, comedy is hard. For Americans, doing is easy, being is hard. This crisis forces us to just be when we want to do. I guess we'll just have to settle for doobie 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 doo.
Day 43. During the Roaring Twenties, while some folks were drinking gin and doing the Charleston, my grandmother, Mother Shelley, was rearing 2 children, churning butter, killing poisonous snakes, harvesting figs, pears, peaches, scuppered on grapes, and preserving them, changing to her worm bed, all the things a mother and a farm wife had to do, memorizing a scripture or a poem every day, and teaching 6th grade. She religiously deposited every paycheck in the bank. So when the crash of 29 hit, she lost every penny. The story goes that my great uncle Wayman came over and handed her a $5 bill. And that was all the money she had in the world. I can just see her, tiny thing that she was, standing in the kitchen holding that $5 bill, realizing that every dime of her hard work had disappeared into thin air, and her thrift and discipline had come to nothing. But I feel sure she wasn't one to linger in self-pity for long. She had to get up the next morning, do all her chores, go back to teach school. Her son, who was 21 at the time and getting started in life, never really recovered from that. The rest of his life, he stuffed cash all around the house in jars and drawers and secret places that the bank crashes couldn't reach. After America finally kicked out Hoover, FDR created the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And if that had been in place in 1929, Mother Shelley's hard work and savings would have been protected, and unfathomable suffering would have been avoided. So today, I am grateful for the guts of FDR, who turned against his own class to save the nation from it. It's time for us to pick up that torch again.
Day 51. My calendar is almost completely empty, yet my days are strangely full. We're all figuring out how to be in this brave new world. My neighbor across the street, Ken, has cut the grass, weeded, sprayed, scrubbed his front steps, trimmed his hedges, washed his cars, hosed down his driveway and his walk, swept leaves along the curb, and then done it all again. The guy next door to Ken seems to be in a bit of a competition with Ken. He comes out moments after Ken goes in to weed, whack, mow, and prune everything in the plant kingdom into submission in a less frantic but more precise, efficient, militaristic fashion. I have never seen the two of them speak. The street is so lively. As I stand admiring my wildflowers that had burst into bloom in my front yard overnight, I had been watching them, hands on my hips, toe tapping for some time. I see my neighbors next door were out with their 2 grandchildren. I had a bully chat with the grandma, as we often do. And across the street, Mr. Militaristic Approach to Yards Works' 3 kids were out messing up the order of his yard with a slip and slide. The kids in the house next to them were abuzz with activity. Kids on bikes zipped up and down the street, and I have never seen my street so full of life. It felt a bit like our town. A very different world from the one that existed just a week ago. Maybe this slowdown offers us something better than the treadmill we were on before. Maybe slowing down enough to learn the names of the neighborhood dogs beats gunning past them on our way to yet another errand. I know this for sure. I feel closer to my neighbors, not more distant. Happy social distancing, y'all. May it continue to bring us closer.
Day 52. Yesterday had its weird spots. For me, the morning was a fustercluck of techno-garble, Zoom things, telehealth, bad instructions, no instructions, calls too early, calls too late, old people klutzing around in our new cyber reality. And I really needed to go watch the scene in The Sound of Music where Maria sings, "I have confidence," very confidently, right up until she sees that gargantuan mansion and says, "Oh, help," and then finishes the song confidently. I had put off shopping. Food was running low. The girls insisted on going out into the world to hunt and gather for the family, so their high-risk 60-something parents wouldn't have to. Gretchen and I reviewed the protocol for missions to the grocery store, and as they went out the door, I had a bad feeling. I had been reading about racist remarks and worse thrown at Asian people because of COVID-19, but I thought, nah, this is Austin. It's just going to Wheatsville and Sprouts. We sent them off with their masks, their hand sanitizer, and a grocery list. And I made a joke about how many times Julie Kate would be calling me from the grocery store. And sure enough, that was quite a few times. They didn't have this, they didn't have that. Mostly, they were just out of things. But what she didn't tell me was what happened to them in the grocery store. It took a while after they got back to hear that a big guy with an American flag on his shirt came up to my 2 tiny Chinese daughters and said to them, "Look at those Chinese. They brought this thing over here. Now they're walking around with their masks." JK shrugged it off, said the guy didn't look like he was exactly right in his mind. She says she's used to comments like that. 2 different viruses. The coronavirus makes it unsafe for me to go out, and the racism makes it unsafe for my kids. But I'm grateful that my kids are tough and kind enough to see it as not being exactly right in his mind. Day 54. I heard someone say that it was helping them in the midst of this thing to think about their parents living through the Depression and World War II. When the crash of 29 hit, Mama was only 13. She never talked about the Depression, how it affected her, or if it affected her. She was, of course, expected to do her part, keep her grades up, practice the piano, do her chores, round up the cows for milking, drive her mother, who taught 6th grade, to school and back every day. She did all of that until her father heard about a piano scholarship competition for Wesleyan Conservatory in Macon, Georgia, and put her on the train to go up there and win, which she did. Daddy, though, was 16 and headed off to Hampton-Sydney College on a baseball scholarship. He dreamed of becoming a doctor, and his siblings used to call him Doc. The timing was bad, though. He entered college in September of 1929, and Black Thursday happened October 24, 1929. That was the end of his college career. He had to go home and save the family farm, which he did. Mom and Daddy had very similar backgrounds. They both grew up on farms, but Mama came out of the depression singing, "You gotta accentuate the positive." And Daddy came out pinching the life out of every last penny. The depression of Mama was just another thing that happened to her in her long and eventful life. To Daddy, it was the defining moment of his life. I don't know if there's a right way to do a crisis. So, like Mom and Daddy, I guess we do the best we can according to our gifts. I do know I'm forever grateful for their example.
Day 60. I was listening to Chris Hayes' podcast, Why Is This Happening? Yesterday. A replay of an interview with Michael Lewis and his book, The Fifth Risk. Michael made an analogy that I can't believe I haven't thought of before, although I may have, but since I can't remember what I did yesterday, I can't remember. Well, and the analogy is this. We take our government for granted, just like as 12-year-olds, we take our parents for granted. Our parents are sort of like the furniture. They're there for us. We don't get really interested in them until something scary happens to them, and then like they get sick or die and stop providing the security and support to which we are accustomed. And so by extension, the federal government is of no interest whatsoever unless the person running it is bent on destroying it. Now you got the story. The story comes alive when things are not as they should be. But I find that I don't like being in a story with a bad government in charge. I liked it better before, when the government was just there like the furniture, like our parents. I read The Fifth Risk in one sitting. It's a page turner. Michael Lewis can, as my older daughter says, hella right. The hero is not a government out to misinform, enrage, disenfranchise, or kill us. The hero of this story is an army of experts who work all day managing risk, sometimes existential risks, for us, the people who keep America safe and fucking make it great. It's a compelling story. We need to tell more of these. We've got to get better at telling the story of the amazing things our government does for us every day. It's time to take back the storyline. Day 70. We say we're all in this together, this pandemic. And I want to believe that, except we're all very far apart in this together, at a distance that was first suggested as 6 feet, and now with further study, given the distance droplets from a cough or a sneeze can travel, is up to 13 feet. And then there are the class and economic distances. There are those of us who shelter in place in a nice home, take walks, clean our closets, call old friends. There are those who are crammed into apartments or cramped housing projects. Those trapped in their house with an abusive domestic partner. Those with no homes at all. Those who have to go to work because they are essential. Those on the front lines in hospitals who are literally sprayed with this stuff all day at work. I am aware of these differences, but until recently, more in the abstract. But deaths by COVID-19 circles ever closer in on my safe encampment every day. A theater colleague posts about the loss of actor friends from New York. A friend's brother in Queens passes away. The father-in-law of my wife's cousin dies. My friend's colleague has a 16-year-old son on a ventilator. Our friend, whom we took in as a daughter for many years, is working solely with COVID-positive patients in her hospital in the Valley. A couple of days ago, she lost 2 patients, both within an hour.
But I notice the minute that I venture outside of my orbit, I get little shocks that I am very, very far apart from other people's thinking about what we're going through. Last Sunday, I called my mother's oldest friend to check on her, as I do from time to time. She's one of the last of that generation of my mother's friends. She's never been what anyone would call warm, but she was a real battle axe that day. She did to my good intentions what Sherman did to Georgia. When I asked how she was doing during this crisis, she responded that it wasn't the American way of life. This was not the response I was expecting. This is a woman who lived through the Depression and World War II. She was furious that her freedoms had been taken away by the closing of restaurants. And as for church, she hoped that when people were able to get back, they would thank God for the freedoms that had been taken away. I struggled to find a way through all of this to the woman who used to sing in Mama's choir. She never once acknowledged the existence of a real problem, that thousands of people in this country were dying of this disease, or the fact that she was in the highest risk category. I did the best I could to suggest ways she could get out of the house, take a drive, take in the beauty of the springtime, see the azaleas, the dogwoods in bloom. Oh no, she wasn't going to have that. She could bloody well look at the flowers in her own yard. She wanted to drive and get herself something good to eat, but she couldn't do that because the government had taken away her right to do that. I guess she forgot about rationing, victory gardens, and all that effort for the common good during the war. I had wanted to connect based on the common history of family, hometown, and church, but she made connection impossible. The person who was my mother's friend is no longer there. She has been cannibalized by Fox News.
Another little shock came in a group Zoom when a woman informed us that she was sick of talking about the pandemic. She had lived in Asia, so masks were no big deal, and she'd been isolated at home with twins, so nothing was different for her. So please, to shut up about the coronavirus.
The third came in yet another Zoom call when a woman who clearly had been doing work on another computer and paying no attention to our meeting popped in long enough to wail about her problems and lash out at anyone who tried to help. She was angry that someone had said the earth was getting a break from all the human activity. In her anger, she somehow had missed hearing that the brother of someone in our group was dying of COVID-19.
So, yes, we're all in this together. That's true. And the thing we're in is a mess. We also like to think we're doing the best we can in a tough situation. But frankly, some people's best feels better than others. I will say this, not once in any of these situations did I say, go fuck yourself.
And that is the gratitude of the day. Day 73. My gratitude tonight, as I read about COVID-19 patients having to die away from their family, and the brave health workers holding their hands and gathering around them as they near death. I am so very grateful to have been by my mother's side when she died and to have heard her last breath, which I can hear even now. I am so grateful to have had that.
Day 74. I have had my disagreements with the New York Times through the years. I've written quite a few letters to the editor and a couple published. I hated their coverage of the Clinton impeachment, the WMD's, Hillary's emails, their lack of coverage of Trump's ties to the mafia and his cash deals with Russian oligarchs. we came very close to breaking up with their notorious October 31st, 2016 headline, Investigating Donald Trump. FBI sees no clear link to Russia, which was not what the article said. But the Times is a grown-up. The Times is not just your most respected professor at university. The Times is your university. It's your university system. My father subscribed to the Richmond News Leader, which was not at all like your professor. It was more like your loud, embarrassing, grumpy uncle. But in this time of the pandemic, I have been grateful for the Times. I have been informed, nourished, and enlightened by it. I was delighted to discover that there's such a thing as a sourdough library. I was brought to tears by Nicholas Kristof's video report on 2 hospitals in the Bronx, heartache in the hot zone, the front line against COVID-19. Every American should see that. I felt so humbled by these healthcare workers working long hours without the protection they needed, and so ashamed of my government for allowing that to be so. I was amazed to read the wife of a famous right-wing radio host described the conservative movement as having become a culty hero worship of the uneducated. Bingo. Somebody's waking up. I will never forgive the Times for their obsession with the Hillary's emails, their failure to cop to their role in the 2016 election. And I hate that their headlines say one thing and then the article says the opposite. However, in this pandemic, and since the election of 2016, I am grateful for the truth, and I can often get that from the Times.
Day 84. I won't kid you, today has had its tough bits. And it wasn't the rousing game of Uno after lunch when I came close to hitting my all-time high of 52 cards, duplicate squares, in my hand at one time, which was very entertaining for certain members of my family. It wasn't that I lost after an hour and a half of scintillating play. It wasn't even the freak out when this weird banner popped up on my iPhone, Apple security virus detected, instructing me to touch OK to start deleting the malware, which don't worry, I didn't do that. No, it wasn't that. It was, however, Governor Abbott's announcement to reopen, related to no new set of facts, no newly available testing, no downward trend of cases, no quantifiable bit of reality at all. It was that. That combined with certain of us hitting a wall in terms of being quarantined. I know this will pass. I'm grateful for that. Tomorrow will be better, or at least different. And lucky me, I've got dogs to go walk now.
Day 85. I have always loved the radio. Growing up, I listened to WKLV, my hometown station, and calling the DJ to dedicate songs to my boyfriend Norman, and then listening to hear what he dedicated to me. I loved listening to our high school football games. I loved that I could tune in just barely to a station in Chicago. Chicago, where was that even? When I moved to Austin, I started listening to talk radio and became a fan of KLBJ's Kathy Cronkite, Walter Cronkite's daughter. She had experts on to talk about local issues. They talked in courteous tones, gave information, and debated reasonably. I learned stuff. But one day, I turned on the radio, and instead of Kathy Cronkite, out came an enraged, dismissive, self-important bullhorn of a voice spewing the political equivalent of locker room talk into my house, into the public airwaves, into people's reptilian brains. I remember that moment vividly. I felt assaulted. What the hell was coming out of my radio? This voice wasn't about conveying information. It wasn't interested in having a conversation. The radio station wouldn't let a caller through who had a different opinion. In fact, the very idea of information was for pussies, for dupes. What was important to this voice was, now you see it's all a fraud. I've let you in on a secret. Now you know. Now you're in the club. You're one of us. Congratulations. You're a nihilist, and that makes you a patriot. The demon, of course, was Rush Limbaugh. I was so shocked, I called KLBJ and asked what the heck was going on. Who was this rude guy? And the guy who answered was like, fuck you, everybody loves Rush, so fuck you. I like Rush? Who the hell yells at you so I get to yell at you too? I never listened to KLBJ again. Oh, decades later, I was scrolling through my car radio dial and picked up a sound that sounded right out of World War II newsreel. This is an emergency broadcast. Our democracy is under attack. This is a republic broadcasting, bringing you the truth. Aha, I thought resistance is afoot. The radio host had a voice that sounded a lot like Rush, except he hated Bush and Cheney. Well, I hated Bush and Cheney, and he talked about things that had been bothering me and that nobody on the media was talking about. I too wondered about the coincidence of the Air Force doing a training session on 9/11 that mimicked the exact thing that actually happened on 9/11 and consequently made them unavailable to the real crisis. I wondered why a tower that wasn't hit by an airplane fell, and why the president, after his Secret Service told him that we were under attack, continued to read My Pet Goat for 7 minutes. He spoke my darkest fears out loud. I got a little reeled in. This voice was Alex Jones, whom I now know to be a dangerous, insane, despicable human being. But at the moment, post 9/11, when nothing made sense and the mainstream media seemed afraid to do its job, I needed somebody to put the pieces of this horrific puzzle back together. And for a brief spell, I was inclined to believe Alex Jones because, frankly, nobody else had a better explanation. I sure miss Kathy Cronkite. The Barbarians came and took over radio. And here we are.
Day 86. Just months after we'd come home with Julia Kate from China, we decided to take our darling to visit both sets of grandparents. Gretchen's parents, who lived in Ohio, and my parents, much older, in Virginia. I was so excited. Mom and Daddy were so excited. Everybody was so excited. Ohio was the first stop, and we were there hardly a day before it was clear that something was wrong with our Julia Kate. We were new parents, far from our own doctors, with a child with a massive fever who could hardly hold her head up. When the flu test came back positive for type A Sydney flu, we knew that was a real bear of a strain. And short of a flu shot, which it was too late for, Western medicine doesn't have a lot to offer when you're sick with the flu. Gretchen, ever the troubleshooter with long-distance coaching from our friend Lorena, treated her with homeopathics. And when she finally landed on the right one, Julia Kate threw up, fell sound asleep, and woke up fine. Julia Kate was on the mend, but I wondered what danger bringing her would pose my aging parents in Virginia, so I called Dr. James Harris, our family doctor, and told him the situation. I knew I could depend on him, who loved my parents so deeply, to tell me the truth. When he heard that it was type A Sydney flu, he said in his soothing baritone voice that no, I couldn't bring Julia Kate to see my parents, and that in fact the Virginia Department of Health wouldn't want me to do that either. I felt like my heart would break. I felt angry, like it was unfair that Gretchen's parents, who had gone to China with us, got to see Julia Kate again, and my parents not at all, which is to say, I was unreasonable. I dreaded calling my parents to tell them the bad news. They needed something to look forward to. I hated to disappoint them. I dialed their number. Mama picked up, and I told them what Jimmy, which is what they called Dr. Harris, had said. There was a quiet sinkhole of despair on the other end. And then they both made characteristically plucky attempts at being reasonable themselves, that of course we couldn't come. Of course they were disappointed, but there would be another time. It would have never occurred to me to ignore Dr. Harris's advice, nor would it have occurred to my parents. Dr. Harris was the expert, the authority. It was clear. Here was a virus that needed to be kept away from my parents. And to do that, we had to keep our bodies separate. I am grateful to Dr. Harris's professionalism, his kindness, and his love for our family. And I am grateful that he is not around to see Americans having such contempt for science and for their fellow citizens. And I am grateful that, yes, there was another time that my father got to see Julia Kate, and that it made him happier than he'd been in years. Today, day 87, this morning, I talked to a guy about Medicare and Social Security, which is something a lot of people in my age are doing, and something that reminds me that I am those people's age. Gretchen, on the other hand, nailed a presentation solo in her office while a dozen other people listened in by phone. For some reason, the cheer, rah, rah, ree, kick him in the knee, rah, rah, ras, kick him in the other knee came to mind. Julia Kate worked on the paper for her sociological theory class. Weird thing, she had to write the whole damn thing directly onto Blackboard, and this is to keep students from cheating, copying and pasting off the internet. So the paper just disappears into cyberspace, never to be seen again. I don't know, y'all. I don't know. I perked up when she came down for lunch, said she was going to rewrite it. This is my child. When I asked at dinner what she had changed, she said she took out the passive voice and worked on making it flow better. I'm not sure I've ever heard her say passive voice. Surge of pride. Emmy was poring over Algebra 1 in her room. Her big sister gave her a hard time and said something like, well, wait till you have 4 or 5 polynomials, and then you'll really have something to complain about. I truly did not know what she was talking about. Maybe she didn't either. She's just being a big shot to her sister. So I looked up polynomials, but I could make nothing of the explanation, and I couldn't summon up much interest. So instead, I wrote letters to our stupid senators, asking them to please fully fund the post office, casting pearls to swine, as my mother Shelley used to say. When I came downstairs, the smell of oranges was in the air. Emmy had peeled a bowl full of clementines, washed blueberries, and was in the process of baking off her killer oatmeal raisin cookies. She's been taking care of us. And how lovely it is to let someone take care of you.
Day 89. Today, the guys with guns in the Capitol building in Lansing and the guys in Oklahoma threatening violence to clerks requesting they wear a mask has made me think about how thin a veneer civilization is. After Rome was ransacked, indoor plumbing and flushing toilets vanished from the face of the earth. That's how fast it can all go away when barbarians do what barbarians do. Just because they can. Because freedom. Because haircuts. Because the Constitution. So, It was puzzling to me as an editor for an online high school social studies program when I kept getting lessons from a writer who was not a historian or a teacher on the barbarians. All of the barbarians, Gauls, Vandals, Huns, Saxons, Franks, Goths, Visigoths, Ostrogoths, one lesson for each, a sort of world history, how the barbarians won. I know. This strikes too close to home right now. But let's ask, what exactly did the barbarians contribute to world history? Answer, the Dark Ages. Indoor plumbing was not the only thing that was lost. And America, in 2020, the barbarians are not just at the gates, they're in charge. Their barbaric yawp has never been louder, prouder, and more grotesque. It's time to shine a light on their disgusting behavior, their lack of facts, and their thin-skinned faux reasoning. This isn't economic anxiety. It's barbarism. We can let them win, but we can't let them win. Things are dark enough without another dark age. Today's gratitude is about coming to some clarity about that. Sometimes the gratitude of the day is a tad harsh. Sorry about that. Day 90. Damn it! Just when I got all this righteous clarity about the barbarians, and I mean the very morning after I posted about it, I turned on Joy Reid AM and heard the most extraordinary interview with David Weissman, a former Trump troll. Not just a supporter, but a troll. An army vet who came home after 13 years with 2 tours in Afghanistan. And instead of getting therapy for his PTSD, he waged war online with the liberals he thought were destroying America. The interview wasn't more than a few minutes. The sound was a bit broken up like all the TV interviews are now, but he's a big white guy with a tiny voice. Joy showed a video of protesters screaming in the face of a reporter wearing a mask who had politely asked them to respect the 6-foot distance. The protester yelled that reporter had no right to social distancing in public and pursued the reporter, actually spitting in her face to prove the point. Joy asked Weissman where that attitude came from. He said, these people have been led to believe that Democrats want to take their freedoms and their rights, and that because Fox News and Trump have called COVID a hoax, they don't even believe the numbers of the deaths. He said this mentality had been going on long before Trump. And then the most important question, Joy Reid asked him what changed his mind about Trump. It wasn't a heart-to-heart with a loved one. It was a Twitter exchange with Sarah Silverman, the comedian. She responded with kindness to one of his tweets. And then the two of them had an interesting dialogue where he learned a lot about the values that liberals believe in and learned that the things he'd been told were false. That changed his worldview. And then, once my worldview changed, he said, I was able to see Donald Trump as he really is. And one person changed this guy's worldview on Twitter. Makes me want to say that maybe there is a God, but more importantly, there's a Sarah Silverman.
Day 99. A year ago, I decided what the hell I was going to ask really ask for what I wanted for my birthday. And so I asked for a trip to New York City and as much theater as we could cram in. So I asked, and Gretchen, of course, said yes. And we went the week of our anniversary. On Wednesday afternoon, we saw Nathan Lane and Gary, the sequel to Titus Andronicus, like somebody had asked for one. That night, we saw the magnificent Glenda Jackson in King Lear. But the real surprise was Thursday night, our anniversary, Heidi Schreck's What the Constitution Means to Me. The play is based on Heidi's high school experiences in American Legion speech contests on the topic, What the Constitution Means to Me. Her stories about her grandmother and mother hit me like nothing had before as to how the Constitution had created the hells that had been women's lives. I felt almost sick. Fuck Hamilton, fuck Jefferson. The Constitution created a world of rights for men only. In the second half of the show, a female African-American champion debater from a New York City high school appeared as Heidi's debate partner. The question for the debate was, should the Constitution be left as it is, or should it be scrapped and written anew? They drew straws as to which argument they would choose, and off they went. Heidi argued to get rid of it, the young actress to keep. The debate sizzled your synapses. I was transfixed. The audience was transfixed. Senator Claire McCaskill, who was sitting right next to me, was transfixed. She also seems quite fond of her husband, if that was her husband. I think that's sometimes when I see her on MSNBC. What I did not know was, following the debate, that a member of the audience would be chosen to decide who won. So after the debate, the brilliant young debater came to the edge of the stage, started scanning the audience for a volunteer. I sure wasn't going to volunteer because I'd been so absorbed in the performance, I hadn't been evaluating or taking sides. I was sitting on the second row, and the actress looked toward me, so I looked away, not wanting to meet her eyes. Damned if she didn't say, oh, there's somebody avoiding my eyes, so I pick you. Stood up next to the stage, they handed me a mic, and I had to decide whether to keep or abolish the Constitution. Instead, I first took the opportunity to announce that that night, May the 9th, was my wife Gretchen's and my 26th anniversary. The audience gave us lots of warm applause and cheers for that. And then I felt weirdly frozen about the Constitution. I was so angry at the centuries of wife beatings and oppression and discrimination that had been enabled by it, that Heidi's family stories had so profoundly conveyed and so swayed by her argument to start over that's what I said. I said, scratch it and begin anew. Start with the assumption that a woman is a full-fledged human being and not just a baby mama pulled from the rib of Adam. But when Heidi reminded me that it was the Supreme Court's reading of that Constitution that gave me the right to marry the woman with whom I was that night celebrating our anniversary, I thought, oh shit, was that the wrong answer? All I know was that night of the theater did just exactly what theater is supposed to do. It was thrilling. People did not dash from their seats to the exit. People didn't want to leave. They weren't done. They wanted to stay there in the mix with their fellow citizens. Heidi took audience members and made citizens of them. She turned the theater into a civic gathering. They lingered in clumps inside the theater talking about this issue, the Constitution, until the ushers kindly asked them to move on. They lingered in the lobby until the same thing happened. They kept talking outside the theater doors, on the sidewalk, on their way to dinner and drinks. What a night. Happiness, just sheer happiness.
Day 102. The Second Amendment didn't used to stir up the kind of passion and cult worship it does now. I grew up in a hunting culture in a small town in the South where most households had guns. My father used to go outside and occasionally fire the shotgun in the air. He said, just to remind folks, we are armed and ready. He had a shotgun for shooting quail, a rifle for I don't know what, and a pistol that Mama kept under Daddy's pillow at night when Daddy was on the road. But I never once heard my father nor any of his hunting buddies mention the Second Amendment. Guns were not a religion. They certainly weren't central to his identity. Of course, there have been cranks, the crazy old white guys who lived alone in some tumble-down cabin who threatened to shoot you if you came on their property. Those guys were lonely, poor, angry, probably drunk, social outcasts. They hated the government, but they hated everybody. You avoided these guys. But now, the cranks and their guns and their hate have come down from the hills and into the public sphere. They're not even considered cranks anymore. They are a movement. It seems like people turn to guns when they feel there's nothing else to turn to. The economy has left them behind. Education has failed them. Politicians have ignored them. The things we used to turn to aren't there for us anymore. And although we may be tempted to grab guns ourselves, I think the best plans is to just get out the vote and get everybody to vote. Vote. They always say, vote like your life depends on it. But I think this time it really, really does.
Mother's Day. Today was truly glorious, terrible, relaxing, tense. Our darling daughters ordered tacos for our Mother's Day breakfast. I upset Julia Kate with my tone of voice. Two of us had a cry. Emmy made a gorgeous fruit plate. Gretchen read a very long piece from the Times aloud to us about how Denmark had handled the coronavirus. That conversation got off track, and we needed to go take a long walk in this absolutely beautiful day to clear our heads. We headed out to find the hawk's nest our neighbors had told us about and ended up staying for hours watching the whole hawk family. One fledgling, it was reported, had flown the day before, and the other two seemed to be considering it. Apparently, once they leave the nest, they don't come back, but because they're not great at flying and worse at landing and don't know how to fend for themselves yet, the parents have to keep an eye out and come feed them mostly grackles. Grackles without the wings, in case you were wondering. We learned all this from this wonderful guy, Chris, very old school Austin, who spends 4 hours a day there with his camp chair, camera, and tripod watching the hawks. He drives in from Bastrop every day to do this during nesting season. And on top of that, he's undergoing chemo treatments. There's so much to see when you take the time to see it. On our way home, we passed our neighbors, Ray and Teresa, congregated by their curb with someone named Katie, who had seen a black cloud of honeybees fly down her street, followed the swarm to Ray and Teresa's front yard where the bees had flown into their water meter hole. Katie had scooped a bunch of bees out of the hole and into a cardboard box. The theory being, if the queen were in the box, the workers would make their way all into it by nightfall, and then she would take them to her hives in Blanco. I don't ever remember learning so much on walks before the coronavirus. Today, I was happy and content. I was sad and irritated. Sometimes it's hard always being together. It's hard not knowing where all this is headed. It's hard not having any leadership during the biggest national crisis of my lifetime. Some days, I feel like I'm disappearing. Some days, like I am more solid than ever in my life. But every day is a lesson, and less is more. The day expands. I feel both joy and a sense of my own mortality more deeply. For all of this, in this mysterious in-between time, I am grateful.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone that's been here with us tonight to go along this journey in life among the barbarians. Good night.
Zooby, zooby, zoo. Zooby, zooby, zoo.